So live from Pretoria, Johannesburg, South Africa. We are indeed in the capital of South Africa, for those who don't know, live from the Sheraton. And we are here with an exceptional guest, Mr. Professor Samuel Ewusi from Cameroon. Basically, is a director of the UPIS Africa. And we will have a few questions for you today. Thank you first to say yes to our program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you to you. So you are here in South Africa, full of history. You're from Cameroon. What was and what is your impression so far about the forum that you just attended?
Thank you very much for inviting me to your program. And secondly, my impression about the symposium is that it is a very, very important symposium. It's a stock-taking symposium. It's an evaluation symposium. In Africa, we are not used to evaluating programs except international organizations and international NGO programs, but this is an evaluation of an intergovernmental institution 20 years after its establishment. And therefore, it is critically important for us to look at what the AU has achieved within its 20 years, what are the challenges, and what steps we can take to either strengthen the AU or what direction the AU should take at this point in time. So it's a very critical juncture to be able to examine this. And I'm proud to be part of this process.
I like the fact you speak about evaluation, because like you say, it's not common to African leadership to be evaluated. And you as a director of the UPIS, what will be your evaluation so far in terms of what African Union started and where we are?
The common knowledge and the common narrative in Africa is the self-bashing of negative things about our countries, negative things about our institutions. That's the common narrative, and sometimes the AU has been described, especially the AU Commission, as a tool in the hands of the head of state, who is chair on that here, and sometimes it's been labeled as an inefficient organization which is made up of inefficient countries in Africa. All those negative things are true to some extent. However, we do not have any other organization in the continent. That's all we have. Just like the countries we have are what we have. As bad as they are, it's our duty to fix it. So my approach to the AU is that while it has challenges, it has been able to self-recreate itself in the image of something that is in existence, something which needs to evolve with the times, because the challenges also evolve, and consequently, so far, I would give the AU about a 60% in terms of success, in various aspects, in terms of agenda setting, in terms of conflict resolution, although the approach to conflict resolution has been a firefighting approach because of considering the number of conflicts that are in the continent. So the first conclusion is that the AU is relevant today and it will be relevant in the future. The second thing is that the weaknesses that we find in the AU, especially the inability of Africans to actually pay for their programs, those weaknesses, a case in point, even with the reforms of the AU, that just takes African wallet to 42%. Partners in quote have to still pay 58%, yeah. And we know that in international relations there's no free lunch. So that 58% is not free lunch, and it's much more than what we contribute. So those weaknesses are there, but I think those weaknesses can be strengthened. An institution which is just 20 years old is a very young institution.
Yes, very young.
Our countries are about 60 years old. These are still very young countries. These are states which are a project. So this institution is also a project, and therefore this symposium to take stock is very important in a bid to see whether we are moving towards the objectives. But one very key important thing is that the AU has been able to design a long-term broad vision, 2063, the Africa we want, not the Africa we need, but the Africa we want, so that we should be able to move in a particular direction. And therefore it's important for the programs which accompany this vision to be properly implemented. But one caveat, we have to be able to pay for them.
Yeah, I would like, before you go to the payment, I would like to say one Africa, our Africa. Many people speculate about the fact that the African Union doesn't dispose the information for the population, and there's a lack of integration and involvement of African population to the discussion. What will you say to that?
Yes, because that is very true. Because the AU is an intergovernmental institution. The members of the AU are states. Yeah. And apart from that level, you have regional economic communities which form the building blocks of the African Union. So that's another step. Then you have states. And therefore, it becomes cumbersome for the African Union to come from the high ground right down there for the common man to be able to relate to the African Union. The average African does not even know what the African Union is doing, or what it has to do, or how it contributes to its life, because our states are more elite driven, and the African Union mirrors that. And consequently, those are some of the things we need to start talking about. We need to bring it in the conversation that it has to be a bottom-up approach rather than a top-bottom approach as it is at this point. Because if we don't change the African Union to be like that, the ordinary African will be unable to relate with it as it is at the moment. Yes.
So now going to the finance, what will say are the challenges for the African Union to auto-finance their own institution? Because like you say, in finance, there is no gift. So now, two questions. How do you get to this autosufficiency, and what stops us, since we are the continent apparently of money?
Yes. I often say that Africans are like Adam and Eve. They live in paradise, but they had no clothes. We talk about how wealthy the continent is, but how poor the population is. Now, how do we lead to autofinance? The fact is that the African continent possesses the wealth to be able to cover its programs, to pay for its programs, to pay for its projects. Now, I give the example of Ethiopia. Ethiopia was blocked from international funding by Western countries because of their allergy towards funding anything that has to do with the Nile. Considering the relationship between Egypt and the Western countries. However, how did Ethiopia proceed? Ethiopia went through crowdfunding. If they tell every African, every African, because our economy is more than 1.1 trillion, 1.2 trillion. Yes, if they tell every African to bring $1.
But for that, they should need. They start to have to involve them. That's what we were talking about.
Absolutely. Yes, if they tell all Africans to bring $1, that will get to $1 trillion.
Yes.
Now, so that's crowdfunding. More so, you have a lot of African leaders who are extremely wealthy, maybe out of corruption that we know, but of course they are wealthy, they should be able to do that. Why should the Chinese build the AU headquarters? Ordinary people will know that that building should be bogged by the Chinese. They must be listening to everything we are saying there. There are many Africans who are able to build that. I think it cost about $250 million, and that is nothing to a lot of wealthy Africans and wealthy African countries. So I think it's a mentality thing. It's a matter of political will. The African does not put money where his mind is. And the Americans will say, show me the money. And they say, money speaks, bullshit works. So you have to be able to pay to be able to have leverage. So if you look at most of the funding, especially on the key objective of the African Union, peace and security, about 90% of the funding is external. Now, if it's external, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. What is the interest of the West? The interest of the West is not conflict prevention or peace in Africa, because they are the ones selling the weapons in the first place. And so it is important that in the area of peace and security, which is the key objective of the African Union, let's pay for it. And Africans can be able to pay for it. Let's put money where our mouth is.
Yes. But thank you for that. And to close, I would like to ask you, in a personal note, what will be the good strategy for African Union to develop the Africa that we want for 2063 as is planned?
Yes, there are many ways of looking at how it can evolve. We have to start dealing with the challenges, and some of the challenges involve the age of African leaders. The average age of the 10 oldest African heads of state is 80.2 years. The average age of the ordinary African is 19.4 years, which means that the oldest African leader is 4 times older than the average African. Now, we have to deal with those things because some of them are older than the countries they actually govern. We have to start dealing with that so that people don't look at the African Union like a club of old people having a conversation in an environment which is remote from what they actually know. We have to deal with that. The next strategy is that there has to be new strategies, relationship between research and policy, new strategies on how to transform the African Union from a more elite-driven top-bottom approach to a people-centered institution as it is actually written. So that's one strategy. And the third is that they have to find a way to fund the African Union. The Kagame reform, which prescribes the 0.2% on tariffs to be given to the African Union, only about 25 countries, representing about 47%, are at different phases on the implementation of that program. If all of them pay, it just amounts to 42% of the budget. So it's still not enough. It's not enough, and therefore we have to still be creative and innovative about how to raise funds to strengthen the African Union.
Thank you very much, Professor Emmanuel. It was a pleasure to have you on our program.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you so much.
Thank you.